Okay, let's dive in. We all know the name, right? Sony PlayStation.
Yeah.
Absolute legend of 90s gaming.
Oh, completely. Iconic.
But, its story isn't the same everywhere. It landed differently depending on where you were in the world, especially in places going through, well, huge changes back then.
That's a great point. What happens when this, cutting-edge tech shows up somewhere facing massive economic upheaval?
Social shifts.
Yeah. How does something meant for fun, for entertainment, fit into a reality where sometimes just getting by is the main thing? And that's really the core of our deep dive today. We're looking at these 90s gaming clubs, often called igrovúha in the CIS countries, the post-Soviet states.
And specifically, how the original PlayStation, the PS1, became such a big deal in that scene.
Exactly. And our source material, it's really personal. It's a memoir. Someone looking back at their childhood during that exact period gives us a real ground-level view.
Yeah, this isn't some dry academic paper. It's lived experience.
Which lets us kind of peel back the layers, understand the day-to-day stuff, the dreams kids had, but also the real struggles families face just trying to get a piece of this new world.
In this environment that was changing so fast and often really tough.
Definitely.
So our mission here is to jump right in, pull out the key moments from this story, and really get a feel for this mix of tech, culture, and honestly, just survival.
Resilience, yeah. And the source makes it clear right away owning a PlayStation back then, for most families, completely out of reach.
It's impossible.
He says parents couldn't just drop, 3 salaries on a games console?
3 salaries? I mean, wow.
Yeah, priorities were just elsewhere. Sometimes, weirdly elsewhere, the memoir mentions parents putting savings into, volatile investments instead of maybe essentials. It was a strange time.
It really paints a picture. Makes having a PS1 seem less like a cool gadget and more like some kind of fantasy object.
Totally. And the author didn't even have a color TV at first.
Right. Stuck with an old black and white set, and the main one had broken down. So forget a fancy Japanese console, even a new TV was a stretch.
And you gotta remember the bigger picture. The 90s in those countries, it was messy after the Soviet Union collapsed.
Total disarray.
A lot of uncertainty. Everyone was just focused on figuring out this new, often pretty harsh reality.
Absolutely. So while the PlayStation is launching and booming in, say, Japan in 94, the US in 95.
Getting loved for its huge game library more than just raw power.
Right. In places like the source's city, Bishkek, most people barely even knew the PS1 existed until maybe 97.
That gap, it makes you think, how does new tech usually spread when the basic economy and society are just completely in flux?
Good question. For kids there, the console dream they might have heard whisperings of was probably more like a Sega.
Yeah, Sega was a bit better known, or maybe even just a Dendy, that Famicom clone.
And the source didn't even have a Dendy. A Sega only turned up years later, like early 2000s.
Wow.
But here's the key thing from the memoir. They weren't too bummed out about not owning one, because right around then...
the clubs started appearing, the igrovúha.
Exactly, they became the way in. And the description of the very first one he saw, it's amazing. It was an old wagon on wheels.
A wagon, seriously?
Yeah, literally parked near his school, just this improvised little space.
Okay, wow.
Somehow they crammed 3 TVs, 3 Sonys inside, kept it dim, windows covered up. Sounds incredibly basic.
Makeshift is the word. But also, sounds like it was incredibly popular.
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
He mentions having to sign up practically 2 years in advance to get a turn.
Just because the demand from their school alone, 1,000 kids, was way more than 3 PlayStations could handle.
That density, he says, meant no room for spectators just hanging around, which he actually saw as a plus.
How so?
Avoided the dark personalities, he called them.
Right.
People bothering you while you're trying to play.
Right. Keeps the focus on the game. But that image, it's such a contrast. Access to these cutting-edge digital worlds.
Inside this rickety old wagon.
Yeah. A structure that sounds so temporary, so precarious. He even notes it could literally just hook up like a trailer and disappear overnight.
Like goods in the night, he says.
Wah.
And that's exactly what happened. One day, poof, gone.
No way.
Vanished. Like it was never there. Maybe it moved between schools, trying to stay under the radar from, authorities or whoever.
Yeah.
But imagine being a kid, finally getting close to your turn, and it just disappears.
Man, the disappointment. It really speaks to how unpredictable everything was then.
Totally. And even just getting to this wagon, only 100 meters away, he said it felt like a dangerous mission.
Like being a spy or something.
Yeah, like a partisan sneaking through enemy lines, he puts it. because of the constant threat from Gopniks.
Ah, the Gopniks, right? Local toughs, basically.
Pretty much. The memoir paints a vivid picture. They weren't just hanging around, they were actively targeting kids going to the club.
What, like trying to steal their game money?
Exactly. Trying to get you to buy their tokens with your money. Or just straight up shaking you down. Even little first graders weren't safe.
Jeez.
The source talks about needing chameleon-like stealth, maximum hiddenness, but says their eagle eyes could spot your lunch money practically before your mom even gave it to you.
That's intense. It really shows how these clubs weren't these safe little bubbles, were they?
Not at all. They were right there, embedded in the tough realities of street life. Danger was always close.
And it's telling that the author never actually got to play in that first wagon club.
Nope. Bad luck. His older brother did, apparently, but not him.
Right. So the wagon vanishes. Then what?
The search continued. Eventually, they found a different Igravuha, probably late 98 or so. This one he describes as more civilized.
Okay. How so?
It was in a regular house, looked normal from the outside, but had big iron gates. Secure.
And getting in wasn't automatic.
Apparently not. There was a rule, especially if it was busy.
Yeah.
You had to say you were there to play, not just to watch.
Declare your intentions.
Yeah. Saying you were there to play made you an elite welcome guest. Sort of established a little hierarchy based on who had money to spend.
Interesting. A little bit of power in declaring you're a paying customer.
Right. And inside this place, it was an insulated garage.
A garage, okay. More space than a wagon, presumably.
Definitely. 5 TVs, those chunky original PS1s. And later, they even added a couple of PCs.
Oh, computers too.
Yeah, with small, kind of yellowish monitors.
Yeah.
Older kids played strategy games on them, looked like Heroes of Might and Magic, maybe Diablo.
Gotcha. So a slightly more established setup. What was the vibe like inside?
Intense. Maybe slightly less cramped than the wagon, but still loud. Really loud.
Okay.
Walls covered in game graffiti, Tekken 3 characters, twisted metal stuff, and the noise. Just imagine.
Buttons clacking.
Game sound, relentless button clacking, yeah. Sound blasting on all 5 TVs at once, no headphones back then. Plus a lot of swearing from kids getting frustrated.
Sounds like chaos.
Well, controlled chaos, maybe. The guy running it, this apparently, had a strict no cursing rule.
Really?
Yeah. Swear you get kicked out, and you'd have to basically beg to be let back in next time. So there was some attempted order, even if it was rough.
Okay, so a bit of discipline amidst the noise. What was the first game the author played there?
Tekken 3.
Ah, classic. Absolute PS1 staple.
Totally. And he admits he was terrible, just mashing buttons, losing like 20 rounds straight, getting super frustrated.
I think we can all relate to that early gaming experience, just pure chaos on the controller.
Definitely. But this club had a cool way to pick games.
Oh, yeah.
A big folder, like a binder. And inside, they glued the actual paper labels from the game discs onto the pages.
No way. Like a physical catalog you could flip through.
Exactly. Decades before we had digital storefronts, you could just browse the available titles right there.
That's actually brilliant. So resourceful. What did they pick after Tekken?
Twisted Metal, another classic. Car combat mayhem.
Oh yeah, definitive PS1 game. Carnage on wheels.
But then, reality bites.
Time's up.
Yep. The dreaded pay more or leave. They didn't have any extra cash.
Yeah.
So after what felt like just moments, their 2 hours were done. Out they went.
Ah, the tyranny of the clock in those places.
Totally. And he describes walking home in the fog and rain, thinking about Silent Hill, which he hadn't even played yet, just heard about, and feeling genuinely spooked walking through the dark streets.
Wow, that contrast between the intense, absorbing digital world inside.
And then boom, back to this kind of eerie reality outside.
Yeah. And then having to face his mom for being late from school.
Another layer of universal childhood fear, right on top of this very specific 90s gaming club experience.
Absolutely. Relatable stuff. So, okay, they became regulars at this garage club, sounds like.
Yeah, despite the intensity. But eventually, another place opened up, even closer to their home.
Okay, a third club. Was this one better?
Different. And according to the memoir, maybe not better, it looked more civilized again, decor-wise.
How so?
Plain gray walls, like an office. Uncomfortable chairs. But the atmosphere. He says it was much worse.
Oh, what made it worse?
There's a big open room, maybe 8 tables set up. But instead of just 1 or 2 kids per TV,
Crowded.
super crowded. Up to 10 kids crammed around a single screen sometimes. And crucially, the person in charge, the admin, seemed to care way less about what went on.
Ah, so less order.
Way less. Constant swearing, fights breaking out.
Yeah.
It wasn't punished, it was just part of the scene.
Okay, that sounds like a recipe for trouble.
And the Gopniks, they weren't just outside anymore.
Oh no, they were inside.
Yeah, hanging around inside the club,
Yeah,
sometimes drinking. The memoir describes this palpable fear when they walked in.
I bet.
The whole place would go quiet, spectators would scatter, and these guys would bully kids, demand turns on the games, ask for money or food they knew the kids didn't have.
Using threats if they didn't comply.
Exactly. It sounds like it really highlighted how vulnerable the kids using these clubs were, often from families who couldn't afford their own consoles. Made them easy targets.
Yeah, that makes sense. Staying late there sounds like it could be genuinely dangerous. He mentioned someone getting beat up every day.
Grim stuff. And then there's the ultimate kid humiliation.
What's that?
Your parents showing up, yelling, maybe swearing, dragging you out by the ear because you're at the club instead of doing homework.
Oof. Yeah, in front of everyone.
Right. After you've maybe tried to build up some kind of cool persona there. Just mortifying.
Strips away any social standing you thought you had. And the police? Did they ever intervene?
Sometimes they'd show up, apparently looking for the Gopniks, but usually during the day when the Gopniks weren't even around, so not much help.
Right. Sounds like a pretty chaotic, sometimes scary place. But one upside he mentions,
Yeah.
the sheer number of games available at this chaotic club.
Okay. More variety.
Though he does say a lot of the discs were scratched up beyond repair.
Right. Pirated copies, probably. Badly treated.
Exactly. Or the ones that did work were buggy. You'd have to physically tilt the console or prop it up in weird ways to get the game to run.
Huh. Another classic detail of that era. Making do with dodgy tech. It was access, yeah, but often flaky access.
Definitely grounded in the reality of the time, but if you could get a game going.
There was variety. Racing, fighting, adventure games. He mentions dedicated FIFA players who just camp out for hours.
And the crowd around the FIFA games sounds like it was intense, like watching a real match. Everyone invested.
Yeah, but then switch to what they saw as a boring racing game.
And poof, crowd vanishes, looking for the next big fight or goal elsewhere.
I have to admit I was guilty of loving the racing games. He says he loved Driver on PS1, even if nobody watched.
Oh, Driver. That game was hard.
Notoriously.
Huh.
He talks about failing missions over and over, struggling just to get the car out of the parking garage in the infamous tutorial sequence.
Oh man, that tutorial, it broke so many people. But that difficulty, it highlights another really interesting point he makes.
How's that?
How having access changed the experience. Later on, he got to play Driver 2 at a friend's house on their own console.
No time limit.
Exactly. No clock ticking down. He could actually make progress, figure out the missions, even the complicated ones where you're chasing people or playing as the cops.
Access without those constraints.
Yeah.
It totally changes how you engage with the game. Makes sense.
He only got his own PS1 much, much later, didn't he?
Yeah, a borrowed slim version, way later, like mid-2000s. He played it solid for a week with his brother, late into the night, finally getting to properly experience those games.
And the games they played then, Fighting Force, Spider-Man, Need for Speed 2, Colin McRae Rally.
All PS1 classics,
Yeah.
finally getting the full experience. Although even with the modern flat-screen TV, he mentions the hours of play led to serious eye strain.
Some things don't change. But it's amazing how powerful that console experience still was years after its prime.
Totally. And the real masterpieces,
Yeah.
so Silent Hill 2, Metal Gear Solid, Tomb Raider, Resident Evil, those only really became accessible much later again, once the internet became widespread.
Right, opening up that whole world of game knowledge, emulators, availability.
Yeah. And this whole story, it also marks the end of something, doesn't it?
It does. The end of the Igor era, at least in that PS1 form. They mostly faded out in the early 2000s.
Right around the time personal computers got big.
Exactly. PCs and games like GTA, Vice City, Counter-Strike. They offered something different. The PS1 clubs couldn't really compete.
They either shut down or maybe shifted to become computer clubs instead.
But you get the sense that in the memories of those kids from the 90s, these places hold a really special significance.
Oh, for sure. They were where they first got a taste of that, cutting-edge gaming world, often with money they'd saved from school lunches.
They were these vital hubs, weren't they? Places where kids from similar backgrounds, the ones who couldn't just have a console at home,
Could connect, share this passion.
build friendships, navigate all the complexities and, the dangers of growing up in that really tough, unpredictable time.
So, thinking back on our dive, We've gone from this almost impossible dream of owning a PS1 in that post-Soviet world.
Through the harsh realities, the rise and fall of these clubs, from wagons to garages to chaotic rooms.
The specific games that grabbed everyone, like Tekken and Twisted Metal.
And the whole social dynamic inside them, that mix of shared fun, connection, but also sometimes real conflict and fear.
Right. These places were clearly more than just arcades. They were community spots, hubs for kids without easy access to this stuff.
Absolutely. Places to bond, share something exciting, and just figure out how to grow up when the world around you is changing so fast.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about how access to technology or, the lack of it really shapes how people connect, how communities form, especially for young people.
Mm-hmm. What does this whole story of the 90s Gavuha tell us about, innovation, community building, resilience, all in the face of serious economic hardship and social change?
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder of how technology, even when it's scarce or hard to get to, can create these unexpected, vital communities.
And leave a really lasting mark on people's lives, a shared experience even born out of difficulty.
Definitely something to mull over. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive today.
Thank you. It was fascinating to explore this piece of history.
Until next time.